In the gospel today, Jesus is traveling along the road alone with his disciples. He took them out alone. This was not a trip that they were going to engage the towns of Galilee. They're traveling along. And he tells them, gives a second prediction of his passion. He says the Son of Man will be taken and will be killed and will rise in 3 days. And they don't understand. And they don't ask him because the last time he made a prediction, Peter said, no, that's not going to happen. And the Lord, he corrects Peter. They eventually arrive in Capernaum, which was his home base in that part of the Holy Land. And most likely they were at the house of Peter. And they arrive and he says, what were you all talking about or arguing about on the way? And they were quiet, and he knew. He said, you were talking about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom, but you still don't understand my kingdom. Talking about who's going to be the greatest. And they're probably in their minds are like thinking, okay, whenever this thing happens, he's probably going to go to Jerusalem, he's going to take his throne, and then he's going to appoint us to different, high positions. So who's going to be the greatest? He says that Jesus is telling them that is not the way it's going to work. And the greatest among you must be your servant, must be the servant. And they're like, we don't get it. It has to be the last and servant of all. It's a humble servant leadership. They don't get it because they've seen this example of the Romans and they're wondering how things are going to work out and how is it going to work for their advantage. They're thinking like the second reading with selfish ambition and jealousy, and they're thinking not as God thinks, they're thinking as man thinks. Selfishness and jealousy and ambition. And the Lord says, no, it can't be that way with you. Then he does something amazing. Now he's in this house, it's probably Peter's, and maybe one of Peter's children, or maybe Andrew, because Andrew and Peter are brother and brother, and maybe it's one of Andrew's kids, but he takes this child and places it in their midst, and then he gives this child this beautiful hug. And he says, whoever accepts a child in my name accepts me, and not only me, but the one who sent me, the Father. They're like scratching their head. What does all of this mean? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. See, in that time, and in this time in many regards, children were considered non-persons. They didn't have any social status. They didn't have any rights. And he's saying, receive one like this. I think of that, considered non-persons. Yesterday we had this mass with the bishop, and we had the Aid for Women Center gala. And so many in our country, in our world, consider the infant in the womb as being a non-person, not having any rights or voice or status in the community. And this is the case for the children at that time in the time of Jesus, the children that were born. And he's turning everything up on its ear. Say, no, it can't be the way it is with you. You have to receive God as you would receive a little child, seeing the dignity and the value and the love contained therein. I think about this after this time with the bishop and after the time at the gala. And, last year, a lot of things were happening. And it was a time where I could step back and take a look at the ministries at St. Timothy's, because so many of them were stalled, heartbreaking. And the ones that were essential and kept going were ministries to children. And that tells me a lot about this parish. It tells me a lot about this parish. that this parish has a heart and a will for young disciples and making young disciples. It's a huge part of what we do here. And I was thinking about this last year, and it's spending a lot of time thinking, it's like, wow, we're really in this parish in the business of making young disciples. And that's following what Jesus is saying today. Now think about it. We have St. Timothy Catholic School, grade K through 8. We had a hard time last year braving the storm. But we were still in the process, no matter what, with all the adjustments and all the things that we had to do, of making young disciples. K through 8. And we have the Daycare and Preschool. Now, because of COVID, I don't go over there when they're operating, but I do have some meetings over there after in the evening hours, and it's with adults and there's nobody else in the building. And sometimes I go down the hall to hear confessions, and I'm in this room, and there's this high chair that's like crescent shaped, and all these little tiny places for children to sit to be fed. And in the next room, all these cribs for little children under the Catholic Church umbrella. And we have that, Daycare and Preschool. We have St. Timothy Catholic School. We have the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. All these little kids come in and they learn every week basic things, day by day, week by week, all these little things about Jesus and being a follower of Jesus. We're seeing the value and dignity in these children. We're saying this faith is absolute gold, and we want to pass it on to you. And then we have Edge for junior high kids, and we have Life Teen for kids that don't think they're kids. All to make young disciples. And if you look around St. Timothy's at every Mass, you see moms out to here and little ones in tow. And then you got parents. Some of them are very special parents that have very special needs children. And we have some very special parents who have children that are adopted. And I just got to take a breath. And it says to the world and to the rest of the Catholic Church, St. Timothy welcomes children. St. Timothy's welcomes children. You know, I've worked in a few parishes, even as a transitional deacon, and it's come to my attention, and I'm sure my colleagues' attention, people will complain when little ones get fussy at Mass. And they say, Father, you got to do something. You got to do something. You got to fix this. Well, here's going to be my ongoing response from Bishop Olmsted. It's in his document and recommended reading. Didn't come out too long ago. Complete My Joy, an apostolic exhortation to the husbands and wives, mothers and fathers of the Diocese of Phoenix. He talks about the fussiness in church. He's 74 years old. He's seen a lot of fussiness. He served in places like here in the United States and in Italy and other places. This is in a section entitled Faith Formation and human formation of children. Paragraph 81. Your domestic church, which means your church at home, as you continue to grow, educates your children powerfully. This begins when families introduce their young children to Jesus in the Eucharist. I want to especially encourage you to bring your young children to Mass. Your presence is wanted and needed among us in the family of the church. While the squirming or crying of children may seem bothersome, these certainly do not block your reception of God's grace. If the church is not crying, it is dying. Present at Mass, during these early years, your children are learning the rhythm of relationship with the Lord and His church. That's what I'm going to say to you when you come and complain. The church is not crying, it's dying. St. Timothy's welcomes children. Children are welcome at St. Timothy's. That's going to be my response until you finally get sick of me and walk away. You send me an email, I'm going to say the same thing. I'll quote from this and say, hey man, have you read this? Have you read this? This is what the bishop says. Then if that doesn't work, I'm going to take you on a trip to Guatemala or Mexico, and we can go to church there. And those of you that have been to church there, you know that Mass is very noisy. Lots of children. Guatemala, mom could be breastfeeding coming up for communion. And I think to myself, wow, we're feeding her, she's feeding him. Very different. They have a whole different way of focusing, a better way of focusing. Yes, we have cry room and so forth, and we have to be aware of that and all those kinds of things. But if the church isn't crying, it is dying. And St. Timothy's Catholic Church welcomes children. And we welcome children because we're followers of Jesus Christ. And we want to make them followers of Jesus Christ too.